Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends and neighbors, we have an extra special episode this week because we have an interview with one of the stars of this week's film, King Kong Escapes. Linda Miller, who played Lieutenant Susan Watson in the movie, will be joining us later in the episode. But first, the theme song and some of our usual shenanigans.
1, 2, 3, 4. Monster movie.
Fun time, go! Monster movie.
Fun time, go. Monster
Movie.
Fun time.
Go!
Monster movie. Fun time, go.
With Precious D and Honey Bee.
Fun time, go!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Monster Movie Fun Time Go. I am your host, Honey Bee.
And I'm your other host, Precious D.
And today we are talking about King Kong Escapes, which we talked about in the last episode is very closely related to the King Kong show. It was birthed from the King Kong show. Here we are with King Kong Escapes in 1960, question mark? Was it 67? Yes, 67.
1967. The Japanese title is Kingo Kongu no Gyakushu, King Kong's Counterattack. A number of these Japanese films involve somebody's counterattack. I don't know why. Yeah, 1967, in color, 104 minutes, directed by Ishiro Honda, with
Shout
music by
out.
Akira Ifukube.
Yeah.
And it is a co-production between Toho and Rankin and Bass. And I believe that's partly just because Rankin and Bass has the rights to King Kong at this time.
Right.
One of the other movies we watched was gonna be it was Godzilla versus the Sea Monster, Ibira, Horror of the Deep. That was going to be a Kong movie.
Oh, yeah.
Either they couldn't work out the rights or they just changed their minds. I don't remember why, but
Mhm.
that was in the same time period, just the year before. So yeah, what this does is basically take a couple of the ideas from the King Kong show, but not adapt the show directly. So the Bond family is not in it.
Right. We exchanged the tiny white kid for a white woman.
Yes. We get two white people. We get a white guy and a white woman.
Mm-hmm.
We get a, square-jawed, white, manly man, leading man, who, however, is not the love interest for the blonde
Yeah.
white woman.
Which is pretty great.
Yeah. Also, he's the captain, and it wouldn't really be appropriate because she's also a member of the crew.
Yeah, but none of these movies give a shit about appropriate.
Yeah.
Do they?
We're talking about Rhodes Reason as Commander Carl Nelson.
Carl.
Akira Takarada, who we've seen in multiple movies, going all the way back to the original Kong. The original Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
As Lieutenant Commander Jiro Nomura. And Linda Jo Miller as Lieutenant Susan Watson. Her voice is very obviously dubbed by somebody else. So we watched the English version. There's a Japanese version, but I'm not sure. The Blu-ray that I have has just the English language version on it, I think. And Honeybee, I believe you had to watch it online. It's not streaming anywhere officially, but if you know what you're doing, you can find it. And I couldn't find the Japanese version, but Linda Jo's voice is dubbed by somebody else. But Rhodes Reason dubs his own voice. And the reason that Rhodes Reason dubs his own voice is because he's in the Screen Actors Guild. But Linda Jo was just an American living in Japan working as a model. So she was based in Japan. And she was upset, I think, that she didn't get the opportunity to dub her own voice. And she hated the English. She liked the Japanese voice they used for her. Did not like the American voice at all. But
Did you?
the cost of... No, it's not as bad. It just doesn't quite... I don't know. It comes off sounding very cartoony.
Yeah, it doesn't fit at all.
Yeah, it just doesn't quite... You can just tell that it's not her voice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to describe it exactly, but it's just obviously not her voice.
Well,
It just
I think
comes off
that like how you
weird.
can describe it is that when you're doing a voice acting, you have to act more with the inflections and the tones in your voice than you are, in person. You have to get points across with your voice. And I think that this actor just did dramatic things
She was
like
doing.
to
She's acting like she's on a radio show.
well, that's just how it felt. It's like she was just really like there was. I think that's how it came across as fake to me because it just didn't seem normal. Like her,
Yeah.
it didn't seem like normal inflections and normal tones. It was like super over dramatic and like voice acting. That's what it sounded like.
Yeah.
So it was just
Yeah.
a little distracting, but I mean, you get used to it, I guess.
Right. So anyway, the issue is that flying her back to the States just to dub her voice was too costly when they could just get somebody that was already there to do it.
Sorry, Linda.
But since Rhodes is in the guild and probably based out of America anyway, he was there to do it. Though there's a story that Paul Frees, who we mentioned in the past, who does a lot of voices for Rankin and Bass, does the voice of Doctor Who that we haven't got to yet. Hideo Amamoto plays Doctor Who. Paul Frees does his voice in the English language version, but he also does many of the other voices. And apparently when he ran into Rhodes Reason at the recording studio, said, "What are you doing here? I could do you better than you do."
Damn.
So yeah, there you go. Free's just like, I could just do all the voices myself. As we mentioned last time, Rankin and Bass is most famous for holiday specials. And Paul Frees's voice, many of our listeners might most easily recognize as the voice of Burgermeister Meisterburger from Santa Claus is Coming to Town. So anyway, there's this UN submarine that is just tooling around, going to an assignment, and the captain and his two lieutenants have a little... Well, first we get some drive-by sexism as Lieutenant Susan Watson walks through the sub, and she's the nurse, I guess. And one of the guys is like, "Oh, the nurse like that, I wouldn't mind getting sick."
Yeah, we've seen this bit before.
Yeah.
Also, we just watched a movie recently where there was like the blonde girl in the movie, and there was this exact same skit with her. She was like a lady scientist though, where it's like, "Yes, sir, ma'am, like that
yes.
that whole thing." We saw that.
That's
I mean,
right.
just recently. It was like a few movies ago.
Right.
What was it?
I don't remember, but yeah, there's a lot of that nonsense.
I think it was X from Outer Space, maybe.
Yeah.
And anyways,
She comes in to talk to the captain and Lieutenant Jiro. They mention Kong and the island, and the captain has an interest in this legend of Kong, but they can't go investigate right now. They have a mission. They're right near the island, but they're not. They can't divert from their mission to go check out the island and check out Kong. But then they're going to shortly end up having to do that anyway. Anyway, I got the synopsis here from Wikipedia. Thank you, Wikipedia. But they just jump straight. They skip all that part at the beginning and say an evil genius named Doctor Who.
who is very well cast, might I say,
Yes.
from the cartoon
Creates-
for this man.
Well, this guy actually had some hair, though.
Yeah, but they made his hair. They cut his haircut basically made his head the bulbous shape the cartoon
Yes.
guy had. So
As we mentioned last time, the British show Doctor Who had already been on the air for a few years, but apparently had not yet become an international hit. And this Doctor Who seems to be more inspired by Doctor No. There are some very James Bondy elements in this movie, including Mae Hama playing Madame Piranha or Madame X, depending on which version you're watching.
ooh.
She is just fresh from having been in You Only Live Twice, the James Bond movie.
She's a piranha.
Yeah. The evil genius Doctor Who creates Mechanicong, a robot version of King Kong, to dig for the highly radioactive element X, found only at the North Pole. Mechanicong enters an ice cave and begins to dig into a glacier, but the radiation destroys its brain circuits and the robot shuts down.
I was super disappointed that he isn't controlling the robot from his forehead.
That's right.
Like the
He is
cartoon.
not.
I was like, oh.
He has a remote control this time, which is a little more
Yeah.
practical, but not as much fun.
Totally. Not as much
And
fun.
apparently he stole the design from Commander Nelson, from his sketches.
Mm-hmm.
This is very unclear. We find out later they have some past history, and it seems like in studying the legend of Kong, Nelson drew some sketches, and who just stole the sketches and turned him into a robot? It's very weird. Who then sets his sights on getting the real Kong to finish the job? I don't know why they don't just get some remote controlled bulldozers and earth movers that don't need to have electronic brains per se, and a little bit of lead shielding. But there you go. That wouldn't have been any fun, I guess.
That wouldn't be a very good movie.
Yeah. Who is taken to task by a female overseer, Madame Piranha, aka Madame X, whose country's government is financing the doctor's schemes and frequently berates him for his failure to get results. She just keeps saying, my country, and all we know about it is that it's not Japan. Because at some point, Nelson identifies her as not being Japanese. Or is it Takarada?
No, it's
Jiro Nomura.
I think it is Jiro at first, but then later on, she's confronted by Nelson. But it's Jiro who first says, like, I don't think they're Japanese. And then Nelson,
That's
who's
right.
like, who confronts her.
That's right. The other two clearly Japanese guys who kidnapped them at some point are not Japanese. And they're sure that she's not Japanese. I'm guessing because of Cold War shit that maybe she's supposed to be Chinese, but they don't want to come out and say it for whatever reason. So who knows?
I don't know. I liked it. I like that. Like,
Yeah.
we just never knew or never gave, whatever. Doesn't matter.
I mean, it could have been she could have been from one of those made-up countries that we saw several movies ago. Meanwhile, a submarine commanded by Carl Nelson arrives at Mondo Island. Why did they end up going to the island when they said they couldn't? I don't remember. You just watched it. Why did they?
That's a good question.
I don't remember why they end up going to the island even though they said they couldn't. Where the legendary Kong lives. Here the giant ape gets into an intense fight with a giant dinosaur, Gorosaurus, which is a made-up Asaurus that will show up later, just a year later in Destroy All Monsters. And I'm not sure if he'll show up in Final Wars. He shows up in Destroy All Monsters, All Monsters Attack, and Godzilla vs. Gigan.
Ooh.
Huh. So he does not show. Final Wars, which we won't get to for quite some time, has almost everything in it, but apparently does not have Gorosaurus in it. Anyway, he's a very Tyrannosaurus kind of a dinosaur.
Yeah, and he looks great from the side, but looking at him front on, the suit is not. The mouth of the suit looks great, and the head, but the front, the body, does not look good from the front.
And there's also a sea serpent involved in this battle.
Yes.
He falls in love with Lieutenant Susan Watson, following in the footsteps of Ann Darrow from the 1933 film. I mean, she's blonde, so
annoying.
what's an ape supposed to do?
I really hated that part where they're like, so why does he listen to you, Mrs. Watson? The guy's like, it's simple. Kong's a boy, and well, look at it, ladies and gentlemen, or some shit like that. He's like, well,
right.
So I was just like, oh, for fuck's sake, that's what we're going. I don't know. It's just, anyways.
Yeah, because gorillas aren't attracted to other gorillas; they're attracted to humans.
Only attracted to humans. Yeah, I was like, why are we making it about that? That's so awkward.
I mean, there are some, ostriches will fixate on a human, so that's what I want to see. I want to see a giant ostrich movie where it gets obsessed with a human. I want to mention Linda Jo Miller here, though, also known as Leslie Michaels. She, as I said before, was doing modeling work over in Japan as a teenager and a young adult. Then, for a while, it seemed to be a mystery who she was, because she returned to the United States after 1968 and briefly pursued an acting career under the name Leslie Michaels, because there was already a Linda Miller in the Screen Actors Guild.
Okay.
But her identity was kind of a mystery to Kong fans because of this name change. I guess they couldn't track it. They're like, what happened to her? And it was rediscovered in 2014. And Wikipedia tells me she has since appeared in the G-Fan magazine and in conventions.
Hell yeah.
So, there you go.
There you go. Get it, Linda.
Yeah, I guess people were like, who is this actress? Why can't we find out anything about her? Because she moved to another country and changed her name.
Hell yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Doctor Who subsequently goes to Mondo Island, abducts Kong, and brings him back to his base at the North Pole. And there's a stupid thing here about, well, we'll find where they took Kong unless they took him to the North Pole. Cut to the North Pole. Kong is hypnotized by a flashing light device, which reminded me of Konga. They're doing the same thing where they're just talking to him, hypnotizing him as if he can understand English.
Yeah.
Which he's even less likely to do than Konga was, because he hasn't spent years being... Konga at least had spent a year with that doctor, with that scientist.
Yeah, Kong has
him.
spent like years with natives that don't even speak English or Japanese.
Yes.
Whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, he's hypnotized by a flashing light device and fitted with a radio earpiece. I think he's actually got one in each ear. Who commands Kong to retrieve Element X from the cave. And Doctor Who is a complete dumbass of an evil genius because it doesn't occur to him that the radiation might short out the earpiece the same way it shorted out Mechanicong.
And
but that's what happens.
Kong gets real snoozy.
Mm-hmm.
He just wants to take a nap.
Yep. Problems with the earpiece ensue, and Who has to kidnap Susan Watson, the only person who can control Kong.
Because he's in love with her.
That's right. After Watson and her fellow officers are captured by Who. So this is the part you were talking about when they a helicopter comes to get them, acting like it's a UN helicopter or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And they get on board, and then Jiro is like, I don't think these guys are Japanese.
Yeah, yeah.
But they just go along with them anyway. And, totally get kidnapped. Madame Piranha unsuccessfully tries to seduce Nelson to bring him over to her side. So they have a little very Bond-like thing where she puts on a nice dress and invites him to her quarters and offers him refreshments of one kind or another. And I think he actually says, "What's a nice girl like you doing in a place like this?"
Yeah, something like that.
And he kind of does a Kirk on her. Oh, this is why the lieutenant is not his love interest, because there's got to be this stuff going on,
right?
With her.
I like Lieutenant and like Watson and Jiro. Like I like them together.
Yeah.
They're adorable.
And because it is more of a kids movie and not a Bond movie, we can't have the commander smooching on multiple girls or actually getting into bed with any of them, because it's a kids movie. So they gotta, keep that stuff separate.
Yeah, clean it up.
But she catches feelings for him basically and decides to turn her back on her evil ways later.
Her entire country.
Yeah. Eventually, Kong escapes and swims all the way to Japan, where the climactic battle with Mechanicong transpires.
Yeah.
The two giants face off at the Tokyo Tower, which we have seen. We have seen in multiple movies so far. It's probably pretty easy. Well, it's very iconic, I suppose, and is also probably pretty easy to build a model of.
Yeah.
The Tokyo Tower, for folks who don't know what we're talking about, is basically a red and white Eiffel Tower that's in Tokyo. It has a very similar design to the Eiffel Tower. And I think it is, it says right here, Eiffel Tower inspired lattice tower that is painted white and international orange to comply with safety regulations. It looks like red to me. It's a very red orange.
Yeah.
Built in 1958. It is the second tallest structure in Japan. Well, if that's true, it must be quite a bit larger than the Eiffel Tower then. 1,092 feet. And I think it's a communications and observation tower. The Eiffel Tower was just built as a kind of a stunt for a World's Fair. This actually has a practical purpose. It's a big-ass antenna, basically. Anyway, they have a big fight there, and we've seen a number of fights there in these movies. Kong prevails and destroys Mechani-Kong and kills Hu and his men. Then Kong triumphantly swims back to his island home.
but we gotta talk about Kong killing Hu and his men, because, like, basically, Watson is like, Kong, stop that ship! Get that ship, Kong! And he, like, goes over there, and I'm thinking, this is what I'm thinking in my head, like, okay, Kong's gonna, like, get them, bring them back, everybody gets arrested, haha, if it hadn't been for you kids, kind of moment. But no, he straight just smashes that ship to shit, kills everybody on it, and then is like, later, like, just, like, bounces, leaves, and she's, like, calling him, Kong, King Kong, and they're like, give it a rest, Watson, let him go home. He's tired of what we call society, or whatever the fuck he says.
Civilization.
Yeah.
What we call civilization. Which I think we've seen that sentiment every now and then. That
yeah, totally.
So-called, your so-called. It was in Conga. He's like, oh, our so-called civilization. Here's a bit of trivia from IMBD. As a children's film, Toho pressured the filmmakers to show more gore in the monster fights. Children's media in Japan at the time was showing increasing amounts of violence, especially when compared to the rest of the world. Films from rival studios would show monsters frequently bleeding, while popular superhero TV shows had the heroes routinely slice, decapitate, and overall mutilate their monster opponents. However, effects director Tsuburaya felt that such violence was inappropriate to show on the big screen, and when the studio wanted Gorosaurus to bleed profusely after Kong broke his jaw, Tsuburaya snapped back, "These movies are for kids," he said. "Why do you enjoy showing them blood?" The compromise was for Gorosaurus to foam at the mouth instead.
Oh, someone's gotta care about the children.
We did see in the last Godzilla movie, Ibira's arms get torn off. He didn't spout blood then afterwards, but still, that was a little brutal.
Yeah. I think the, like, goriest thing we've seen wasn't even, like, a Toho film. It was actually, with that, it was when the guy, I mean, was it, he's driving in the car, it was, like, a dad, and he's, like, it's the beginning of the movie, and he's driving in the car, and it, like, blood, like, splatters the window.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about? I think that's, like, the goriest.
I think that was Conga. Oh, no, that was, that was Tarantula.
Tarantula, yeah. It was the spider, yeah.
Tarantula, yeah. It just splatters right on the windshield.
Yeah, that's, like, really the only blood or, like, actual gore. Except for, I would say, Daimajin, but there's no gore, it's just violent. There's no, like, blood splattering everywhere.
There's no neck fountains like in some samurai movies. You cut a head off or slash their chest, and there's just this fountain of blood that comes out. Yeah, we haven't seen it that bad. I saw this film as a child. This is one of the earliest ones I remember.
Oh.
Yeah, I have memories of Mechani-Kong.
Mechani-Kong. Yeah. I actually enjoyed this movie. I did, and I was pretty shocked because until we saw the cartoon, I was kind of like, I don't really like King Kong, like, whatever, I understand, it's, like, the first thing, so, it's like, you gotta have it, and then we watched the cartoon, and I was like, okay, all right, and then we saw this, and I'm like, okay, I get it. I feel like at this point, I like Kong a little bit more than I did before.
What did you think of the look of Kong in this one?
I liked his teeth, like his teeth. I liked his growl. The suit's getting better. He still isn't like quite there. His like eyes are kind of wonky, and at certain points the suit looks kind of fucked up in the back. Like, uh-oh, falling apart there, buddy.
I think he looks better than he did in King Kong versus Godzilla, but
Agreed.
I think he still looks pretty bad. On the
Yeah.
other hand, I think Mechanicong looks great.
Yeah, Mechanicong looked exactly like cartoon Mechanicong.
Right. Oh, I forgot to mention. So Doctor Who, he wears a very snappy cape throughout most of the movie.
Yeah, he also has really angry eyebrows.
He's very, very dramatic looking. Bad teeth, it appears. At least his lower teeth look
I
bad.
did not notice.
Yeah. But this little fur hat he wears at times actually looks quite a bit like a hat that the other Doctor Who wore.
Oh,
The first incarnation of Doctor Who, of the other Doctor Who, sometimes wore a little black.
so do you still think that he's not a Doctor Who ripoff as much as he's a...
It might just be a
Doctor No?
coincidence because,
Okay.
well, they're at the North Pole, and it's a little fur
Oh,
cap
okay.
that you might wear if it's cold. And the other
Sure.
guy wore a little black cap that was, if not fur, it was definitely that's meant to be something you'd wear, for the cold, not for sun protection, but for cold protection. So, yeah, I think that's just a coincidence. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say it's a coincidence. Though they are, at this point, they're both older guys, because, Doctor Who changes his apparent age as he regenerates. But they're both older guys with flowing gray hair and little black caps. So, I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of influence there, but you'd have to prove it in court. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends and neighbors, I have a very special treat today. I have a guest with me, Ms. Linda Miller, who played Lieutenant Susan Watson in the film. Welcome to the show, Ms. Miller.
Thank you so much, Dominic. Thank you.
No, thank you for joining us here. So, we're recording this on July 28th. July 22nd is the day this movie came out 55 years ago.
Oh, God.
That just popped up on one of my feeds the other day. So it's nice that we're recording this so close to the release date. Does it seem that long ago to you?
No, it doesn't seem that long ago. And I remember when the 50th came around, I was like, are you sure it's been that long? Yeah, it doesn't seem that long at all.
Yeah. The older I get, the faster things go.
Yeah, definitely.
So you were living in Japan at the time, doing some modeling, a little bit of television work, I read.
Yeah, my dad was in the Air Force, and it was time for him to be stationed overseas. We got the notice when I was in 10th grade that he was going to be sent the next year to Japan. So I took a summer school, and I had enough credits to skip the 11th grade and go straight to the 12th grade so that I could, when I went to Japan, I wouldn't be in school. That's how I wound up in Japan, is because my dad's, he was a lifer in the Air Force.
My grandfather was in the Air Force, and my mother spent a few years there just right after the war when she was a little kid.
Oh, that's interesting.
She spoke Japanese for a while, but I think she's forgotten it all.
Wow. Yeah, when I was there, I learned to speak Japanese as well, but I've forgotten so much of it now.
Right.
I used to be able to read and write hiragana and katakana, which is 2 of the 3 forms of writing they have. But I've forgotten so much of it. It's kind of sad.
I've been trying to study it myself on a phone app, and the 3 alphabets really is the biggest stumbling block, I think. It makes it very difficult. So you spoke some Japanese, but they did not have you record your lines in Japanese.
Right. Yes. They wouldn't let me do it. I wanted to, but they wouldn't let me do it. Arthur's one who really didn't want me to do it.
Arthur Rankin?
Arthur Rankin, yeah. And The thing is, I think I spoke it pretty good, but that doesn't mean they think I spoke it pretty good, you know?
Right. And acting's hard enough. Acting not in your native language is a little difficult,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Acting, yeah, I had never acted before in my whole life. So it was really a difficult situation. And to add on top of that, although after I shot King Kong Escapes, I was a guest star on a weekly, like a detective type show, and I spoke all in Japanese throughout the show. So I did have an opportunity to actually speak Japanese on film.
Oh, what show was that?
It's called Seven Faces of Man, and I played a princess that was on as an ambassador from my country to Japan, and I guess there was some political intrigue going on, and so there was someone trying to assassinate me, and so the star of the show was like protecting me, you know.
Right. Okay. Oh, I will try to track that down, but I'm betting that's going to be hard to find.
I think you can, but I don't know which episode it was, you know.
Right. I did see your My Three Sons episode. It's on
Did you?
YouTube. I found it on YouTube. I used to watch this show all the time, you know, back when
We all
there
did.
were only when there was like 3 TV channels and you just watched whatever reruns they put on.
Yeah.
The kids today, they don't know.
I have no idea what we went through. I used to be my dad's remote control. He said, Linda, go change the channel, you know. Yeah.
Well, and you
those-
had
those
to,
are
if
the-
there was, now you were an only child, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I am the oldest of 9, and if there was a dispute over which channel to watch, because there weren't 3 or 4 TVs in the house like there are these days.
Like there are now. Yeah.
Yeah, or your phone or your computer.
Yeah.
So before you were in this movie, had you seen many kaiju movies or
No.
science fiction movies?
No. The only movies I ever really saw were in the States, you know, Dracula, Frankenstein. I'd seen King Kong with Fay Ray, but I never, you know, when I was in Japan, I was working. I worked all the time, and I didn't even know what a Japanese kaiju movie was when I was there. I didn't even know when I was in one. I didn't know I was in one, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, at least you'd seen King Kong, and I understand that at the time,
Yes.
King Kong was actually more popular than Godzilla was, which is why they wanted to make those King Kong movies and team them up with Godzilla.
Yeah.
Have you watched any since? Do you keep up with it at all? Or?
The first time I actually watched my movie was in Austin when I was visiting some high school friends, and they decided to have a King Kong Escapes party. So they got the video, and that was in 2016. And or maybe it's 2017. I can't remember exactly. But that was the first time I had seen it all the way through, the American version. I saw the Japanese version when they had the premiere in Tokyo. I think it was in September of '67. So I saw it there. But the American version was 2016, I think it was. It's the first time I saw it. And there were moments I just covered my face and said, oh my God, you know.
Well, I had read you were not happy with the voice they used in the American version. And so you didn't find out about that until 2016?
No, I knew about it before 2016, but I don't remember. I guess it was, I was still living in Japan and Rhodes was in Glendale, California. Right. And I guess he was the one that told me they dubbed everybody, including me, and then when I heard the voice, I thought, oh, Arthur, how could
so
you do
had
that?
Heard it. You had heard it before.
Yes.
You just hadn't seen the whole movie. I see.
Well, and that's why I never told anybody about the movie. Because I was embarrassed, you know. I mean, first of all, I had never acted before, so there were some parts in the film that it was like so obvious I didn't know how to act, and so that on top of the voice, I just never mentioned it to anybody at all.
Oh, that's too bad. Well, that was Julie Bennett doing your voice, and apparently she also did the other woman's voice,
Yes.
May Ham's voice.
Mhm.
And she
Yeah.
did create a distinction between the two voices, and I think she did kind of a better job on the other voice, but that might be part of the reason for that performance, that she was just trying to do two extremely different things.
Well, it's like she made me sound like a child, instead of,
Yeah.
Lieutenant Watson. I mean, she's not a little girl.
Yeah,
And
right.
the little girl voice just blew my mind.
She seems to have done mostly cartoon voiceover work, and it does sound, like a cartoon. Like a cartoon character. Because it's hard to say what exactly it is. It's just very clear when you're watching it. Rhodes' voice matches him. It's obviously his voice.
Yes.
Of course, the Japanese actors, it's not their voices, and you can tell that. But you can also just tell that it's not your voice, and it's hard to say
thank
exactly
you.
what it is.
Thank you so much. That's the biggest compliment anybody's ever paid me. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just something about it that it's just obviously not that person's voice.
Yeah.
But you can't put your finger on what it is exactly. But I think, though, it's an enjoyable film, and I enjoy watching you in it, and I think a lot of your own personality comes through. And anytime a movie's been dubbed, the performances aren't what they would have been. I remember watching a French movie once. It was like a horror movie, and I was watching the English dub, and I switched over to the French, and it immediately seemed like a 50% better movie. Just because the voices didn't seem fake.
Yeah, I have gotten into on Netflix Korean dramas, and when I have an option between subtitles and then their voice being dubbed, I always go to the subtitles because it seems more realistic, when they're speaking their language. Yeah, so I know what you mean.
Yeah, I usually prefer it too. Sometimes with this show, it's harder to take notes though when I have to read the movie. So sometimes I'll go to the dub just so I can make my notes as I'm watching, or I'll watch part in one way and part in the other way.
The pause button where you can pause it.
I do that a lot. It takes twice as long to watch the movie. You're not like in the kaiju movies now, though. You're not keeping up with them, or
no. But I was approached recently, and so I'm waiting. It would be a very small part, and so I'm waiting for the script. And it would be. It's not a Hollywood production or Japanese production. It's just a small little independent thing. So we'll see.
You made another little independent thing recently, didn't you? The New Norm?
Oh, yeah, The New Norm. Yes. And I was, my part wound up on the cutting room floor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was a small part. And actually, when I met the director producer, she had already written the script. And so she wrote a part in it for me. And I thought that was very nice. It was very small. And then she called me and said, and I knew immediately what she was going to say. And I started laughing. I said, "You cut me out of your film, didn't you?" She says, "We ran over too long."
Oh.
So, but I have credits, which really surprised me when I went last Friday to a screening, and my name is up there. I thought, "Oh, that was nice. She gave me credit," even though. I wasn't there.
The same thing happened recently. I believe it was with your co-star Akira Takarada. Filmed a scene for Godzilla. Was it 2014 already? He filmed the scene and then they cut it out because it didn't actually advance the plot. But they could have still put it on the DVD. I wish they had. I can't even find it on YouTube. All I can find is a still photo from it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's too bad because, it would make sense just for sentiment reasons to have him in the film.
Yeah, well, and that's obviously why they did it, but it was just a clerk at the airport ticket booth, ticket counter.
Do you know the first time I saw Godzilla was last August? I was at Bob Johnson every year has a Godzilla at a theater in San Francisco. So I was there for the weekend. They had like 3 theaters, and they would show different films. One was King Kong, one was The Green Slime, and then a couple of Godzillas. So I actually went in and watched the Godzilla movie for the very first time, the original 1954 one. And everybody said, "What? You haven't seen that yet?" I said, "No." So they said, "You go there right now. You've got to see it."
Well, what did you think?
I thought it was good. I thought it had the storyline. I thought was very good, but I almost didn't recognize Takarada-san because he was so young, and I think it was probably about 13 years later is when he and I worked together. So he was just a baby at the time.
Yeah. We've been going through these movies chronologically, starting with King Kong and working forward. So we've seen him in a lot of these. He's one of our favorites. Yeah. And we'll be seeing him in a lot more still. He's in a lot of them. And he's always good, and I enjoy him. Did you enjoy working with him?
Yeah, he was very nice to me. In fact, it could have been an awful experience because of my lack of experience, I guess is the best word. But everybody on the set treated me so good. He just was not, we talked, because I could speak Japanese. So we talked, and he talked about his family and, just normal everyday conversations. And then he and Rhodes were very funny together because they're both kind of tall, macho guys. Because Takarada wasn't your typical Japanese style. He was taller than most of them. He and Rhodes would joke with one another and see who could make which one laugh first. So it could have been a macho standoff, but it wasn't. They were really, really funny, and I enjoyed working with them. And Doctor Who, Amamoto-san, he was so nice. So my whole experience with, and of course Honda-san, but my whole experience with everybody there was just really, really great.
That's great to hear. Speaking of Doctor Who, was anybody in the crew or the production aware that there was another character called Doctor Who?
If they did, I didn't know because I didn't know about it. So I just thought it was a great name, and I had no idea there was another Doctor Who.
Well, at that time, it had only been out for like 4 years. Mm-hmm. And although it was a bit of a hit, it was a hit in Great Britain. It hadn't been exported anywhere yet, so certainly hadn't made its way to Japan yet. Yeah. It's just always kind of funny to see that that's his name. Yeah. And he wears a hat that's rather similar to the Doctor's hat. The first Doctor, who would have been the Doctor at that time. Well, no, the second guy might have been in it already by that point. Anyway, the first Doctor wears a little black fur hat sometimes that's very similar, and they both have long white hair.
I've got a picture of him on my wall right there when we're in the chamber, the ice cold chamber. So he was quite a character. He was funny as could be. It was funny looking, but he had a great sense of humor, and we became friends throughout the production. And after King Kong, he did Fantasia on Japanese theater, and so he invited my mom and I to come down. And so on opening night, we went down to support him, and he was such a sweet guy. A little odd, but very sweet. Yeah.
Have you ever seen the cartoon that preceded this, the King Kong show?
No.
Because the Doctor Who and Mechani-Kong appear on that show. They changed the other people. The heroes are a little family, a father and his daughter and his son. Oh. But and King Kong, of course. So they changed all of that, but they took Doctor Who and Mechani-Kong and Manda Island, and that all comes from this cartoon. That was a Rankin Bass cartoon. Yeah. But the design of Doctor Who in the cartoon is very different than what they ended up with in the in the movie. Those are all on YouTube. If you're ever curious, you can see them. They have an awesome The theme song's the best part of the show.
I thought the music in my movie was awesome, you know.
Mm-hmm. It's isn't it the same guy that does all of them? Akira Ifukube?
Yep. I believe
Yes, Akira Ifukube did the score. He is always good. Speaking of music, I saw The Green Slime for the first time the other day.
Okay.
I don't know how it is. I've never seen this movie before because it's right up my alley, and it has the most amazing theme song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody needs to go on YouTube and listen to that right now. Just turn us off and go listen.
Open the door, you'll find the secret. To find the answer is to keep it. You'll believe it when you find something screaming across your mind. Green slime. What can it be?
When I was in San Francisco last year at the convention, they were also showing The Green Slime, which I had never seen. And so I got to see that as well. And that was quite an experience.
I laughed when I was watching it when they introduced one of the main characters as Commander Rankin.
Yes,
like Arthur Rankin. I was like, "Where's Commander Bass?
Yeah.
Is Commander Bass coming to join us?" But no.
Yeah.
So you were one of the nurses in The Green Slime.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Now the story behind that is we had wrapped on King Kong Escapes, maybe a couple weeks or something like that. And my girlfriend, who I don't even remember who she was now, because it was a long time ago, but my girlfriend said, they're shooting a movie over at Toei. You want to go over and take a peek? And Toei Studios was really close to where I lived. So we went over there and we got on the set and we were watching them. And then the director, I think it was the director, came up to us and said, "Hey girls, you want to be in my movie?" So that we said, yeah, why not? So that's how we wound up on The Green Slime, was like totally by chance.
Well, I mean, it's great whenever you can get that situation. And how did you end up being in King Kong Escapes?
That's even
Did you
more.
have to audition?
I did not audition for that at all. What happened is about a year before I met Arthur, I had a contract to do the cover of a young girls magazine once a week. There were two of us, and we would trade weeks off, and then sometimes we would be together. So I got a call from Arthur, and he said, "I saw your magazine covers, and you have the look of the girl I want in my movie." And I just thought that was kind of bizarre, And so I think he maybe called me twice and says, "Can we get together and talk?" So I met him in Tokyo because we lived on the base outside of Tokyo. And I went and I met him and talked to him. And I thought he was out of his mind. I said to him, "I don't know how to act. I've never acted." And he was like, "Oh, you'll be just fine. You'll be just fine." And I tried to talk him out of it. So I never had a screen test. I mean, I don't know why he was so, reckless, I guess, in casting me, but it was just,
Right.
I had the look that he wanted, and that's all he cared about. So that's how I got
Right.
the part,
Yep.
totally by luck.
Sometimes that's they've got a picture in their head, and that's what they want. And they're like, "We'll deal with whatever else when it comes up."
And I think the fact that I already lived in Japan, so from an economic point of view, I don't have to, get an American actress who's a member of the Screen Actors Guild and meet all those requirements. I got somebody right here in Tokyo. So I'm sure that
so you're
crossed
saying
his
he
mind.
was cheap.
Yeah.
What was it like doing the special effects, like the giant hands and things like that?
Very uncomfortable. That hand was not soft. It was, made out of metal with some kind of fur-looking thing covering it, but it was hard. And so sitting on it was, I mean, it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't real comfortable. And I'm kind of afraid of heights. So I would, they would bring the hand down and I'd climb on it and then they'd lift me up, and I'd say, not too high, not too high, And at the time it was a blue screen. I was in front of a blue screen and
Right.
I had no idea how they were going to do this. And so then they explained to me, okay, this is what we're doing and we're going to fill everything in and, blah, 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 blah. So it was very interesting. But the most interesting part was one day I was walking around the studio a lot and I went into another sound stage and I just happened to walk in when they were shooting the special effects, the little miniatures, the little models that they had. And so they let me watch it. I stayed there and watched it. And the part in the movie where Kong is knocked out by, tear gas or whatever, and then the helicopter lifts him up and, flies him away. I watched them film that. And it was amazing because if you could just kind of squint your eyes and hunker down and like look at it, it looked so real. All the jungle and the people and it was amazing, and it filled up the whole sound stage and they were like on a table and it was pretty incredible. I enjoyed that part the most.
Yeah, we love the models. My co-host Honeybee always refers to them as the toys.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the monsters come in and throw toys around is how she describes it.
Yeah.
So you've been doing some conventions lately, I see.
Yes.
When did you start doing that?
I got a phone call from Brett Hominick out of the blue in 2015. And he's the one who told me that people were looking for me and I had no idea why. I was like, oh no, what have I done? And he explained to me that King Kong had a following and, I kind of,
Right.
Dropped off the face of the earth and they'd been looking for me. And the interesting thing is the way he found me is he was living in Japan and he became friends with Natsuki Yosuke, who I used to date when I was in Japan. And so Natsuki said, oh, and because Brett was telling Natsuki, oh, I'm looking for this girl, Linda Miller. And Natsuki said, well, her middle name is Joe, J-O. And that's why he was able to find me because, Linda Miller, how common of a name is that, So he did an article for G-Fan magazine. I got an email from Jim wanting me to go to Florida for a convention in 2015. And I thought, I don't know who this guy is. I'm not getting on a plane and going down to Florida, And then I got a package in the mail, and it was a letter from Jim, and enclosed were a bunch of pictures from Takarada-san and a letter saying, please come to the conventions. And so that's how I started. I went, oh, if he's doing it and he's with Jim, okay, I'm safe. So 2015 in October was my very first convention. And so I've been fortunate enough to do, several more. Usually it's about 2 or 3 a year before the pandemic, And this year I will do 3. I've done one in June, and then I've got one in first week of September, another one in the second week of September. So hopefully we're back on target.
This is kind of random. Do you know in the Green Slime, did they dub the whole movie, even though it was all American actors?
You know what?
It looks like they ADR'd.
I don't know if they did. You're right, because everybody spoke English in it. So I don't know, because I didn't have any lines.
When you were making Kong, were they capturing any of the audio on set? Was there like a boom mic or anything?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
In the movie, whenever you hear me scream, that's actually me screaming. It's my real voice.
I'm just wondering why they had to dub everything if they were capturing it on set. That's odd.
I don't know if they dubbed the entire film, but definitely any parts that Rose and I were in, they had to I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, obviously they had to dub the Japanese lines for the two of you.
Oh, yeah, for Rhodes and I. I was actually the girl that did my voice in the Japanese version did a good job.
But yeah, as I was watching the Green Slime, I know it was an all Japanese production, but with all non-Japanese actors. And as I was watching it, I was like, this looks like they ADR'd the whole thing. Like they didn't capture any of the audio on site. And I didn't know if that's just how they did. I know in China for a long time, they would just dub everything. They didn't even bother. The Hong Kong movies.
Yeah.
For a long time, they just didn't bother at all recording anything live. It wasn't until like the 80s that they started recording things live. We were talking about how they had trouble finding you. Nobody knew who you were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I assume that's partly because you moved back to America and then changed your stage name.
The reason I did is when I got the job for My Three Sons, I got my Screen Actor Guild card. There was already a Linda Miller, who's Jackie Gleason's daughter.
Right.
And so my agent wanted to keep the same initials, and she came up with Leslie Michaels, which I always hated. And if I had been a little smarter, I would have said Linda Jo Miller, and then, I could have kept my real name.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's how that happened.
Yeah, usually when you see an actor with three names or with a middle initial, it's because somebody else beat them into the guild.
Exactly. Well,
and then sometimes they end up becoming more famous than that person.
Yeah.
Like Michael J. Fox or Samuel L. Jackson. That's why they use their initials.
Yeah.
Well, Linda Jo Miller, also known as Leslie Michaels, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me.
And if you end up being in that movie you were talking about, holler at us and we'll have you back and talk about it.
Okay.
That would be great.
That would be great. Yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here. Linda Miller will be appearing at the Revolution Superfest in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania at their Comic Book and Toy Expo September 2nd and 3rd, and at their Trading Card and Gaming Expo September 4th. And at the Days of the Dead Presents All Monsters Attack convention in Indianapolis, Indiana, September 9th through the 11th. So what are you going to rate King Kong Escapes, Honeybee?
I'm going to say King Kong Escapes is I'll say it's a 4.
Yeah, I'll give it a 4 too.
Yeah. I was intimidated at first. I was like, fuck, are you kidding me? This movie is an hour and 37 minutes. Like, are you, Jesus. But then I never felt like, oh God, like this is dragging on, or like, I never felt like not entertained. You know what I mean? It was like, it was a good movie.
That seemed too long to you?
Yeah, like shit. Usually they're like an hour and 19 minutes, an hour and 20 minutes. And so for that was the whole extra 20 minutes. Like, geez.
Well, yes, for these movies at this time, for, current movies, they're
right. For current movies, sure. But yeah.
All right. Well, I think that'll wrap it up for now. Next week's movie will be Gamera versus Geos.
Gams.
Which I believe you can watch on Amazon Prime. And it's probably on Tubi as well. And it is one that has been done by Mystery Science Theater 3000. So if you are so inclined, you can watch that version a couple of different places. Folks, please follow us on all the socials. You can find links to all that stuff on our page, on our Anchor page and our link in bio page, mmftg.bio.link, I think is the address. Follow us on Twitter. We're probably still having a giveaway because I set a rather high number of followers that we had to reach before we would give away those DVDs. And I think at this point I've thrown a Blu-ray in as well. Rate and review us, like and subscribe, all that stuff. Spread the word, tell your friends, get a tattoo, hire a plane with a banner behind it, engrave it on the moon with a laser beam. Thank you for joining us. I have been Precious D.
I've been Honeybee.
Remember to keep calm and seek shelter in basements.
And please don't misuse science.
We won't see you, but you will hear us next time on Monster Movie Fun Time Go.
Woohoo!
You've been listening to Monster Movie Fun Time Go. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on your podcasting platform of choice. Our theme song is by the Texicano Folk Rock Punk featuring Lita Lopez. You can support the show, find links to our social media, and even leave us a voice message at anchor.fm/MMFTG.